Hi, everyone. My name is Sebastian. I'm a degreeless heathen working out of a home lab in Huntington, New York, and I'm running a series of interviews on the stories behind the PhDs of some of the most interesting scientists I've met on the internet, in person, and elsewhere. And so for episode 3 of Tears and Rain, we have the wonderful Minya, one of my favorite scientists alive today, and we're going to hear about her story. So without much ado, take it away. Tell us, how did you first even think of starting to get a PhD?
Oh, you want the long version or the slightly shorter version?
The long
Actually, I will
version,
just start
please.
talk.
Yeah, just tell us.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Minya, and let me tell you a little about my name first because sometimes it's confusing. Minya is actually my full name. My family name is Min, and my first name is Ya, which is why in many places my name appeared to be Yamin, but I go by Minya, and it can confuse people. It happened a few times that people didn't realize that the person they are talking to, aka me, Minya, that they know, was the one who published the papers for Yamin. So I'm Chinese. When I moved out of China, people started to call me just Ya because that's my first name, and it felt too weird. So I always say I go by Minya. Um, I obtained my PhD in August 2021 at Harvard University. And from 2021 to now, I have been a postdoc at the University of Connecticut. And this practically is my last month as a postdoc. And after this, I'll be moving to Illinois to start my assistant professor faculty job as a department of plant biology at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Um, so let's go back from the beginning. I was born and raised in China. I was born and raised in a city called Chengdu, which is the capital city of a province in China that's called Sichuan. China is kind of big, it's kind of the same size as US, so Chengdu is located in the center part. So we're very far away from the ocean. It's in the middle of China. And we're most famous for two things. One is spicy food and one is panda. I always tell people that pandas don't come from all over China.
Hmm,
They only live in mountains around my hometown.
cool.
Personally, honestly, I think pandas are okay, but I I absolutely love my hometown. I think it's objectively the best city in China. It has beautiful nature, beautiful city, and beautiful people. I went to high school in Chengdu as well. And as my high school is ending, I started to think about what I want to do, what I should do in college. Up to then, I really didn't really think about too much about what I want to do. I was a normal student, kind of type A, very good at a standardized test, but that's about it. It's kind of boring. I have one hobby. I love music. I play music, but I never really considered playing music professionally. So like I was a blank page. I was an open book. So when I was wondering about my own future, what I should do, I had this very brilliant idea that, oh, I want to make a lot of money. What kind of job can reliably help me to make a lot of money? The very naive and stupid me thought I'm going to study finance. So by the end of the high school, I have decided that I want to be rich and I'm gonna I'm gonna study
You decided that.
finance.
It's
Yeah,
established.
it's been established.
Nice.
So up to then, I have never given it any thought about being a scientist. Now looking at myself, being a scientist, very far from being rich, actually being kind of poor. The irony is not lost on me. It's funny. So once decided to study finance, the path for me was actually very simple because the college system in China is very different from here in many other countries. All I needed is to have a good score in the final college entrance exam, and nothing else mattered.
Wow.
And that's the most important exam for most Chinese students. You study your whole life for that one exam, and the score you get determines which school, as well as which major, which department of that school that you can go. So you are accepted into a major of a school directly based on your score. So every university will have a baseline score for acceptance, but different majors will have different acceptance scores upon themselves. The supposedly good majors, of course, will have a higher acceptance score. The not so good one is like more close to the university state acceptance line. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But wow,
Yeah.
and regardless of topic, it does that. Wow.
Yeah. So in short, I if I want to study finance, it's simple and straightforward. I just need to get a good score that can get me into a good finance department at a good university.
Interesting.
And am I studying finance right now? No. Why? Because as someone who were really, really good at taking exams, I completely bumped the most important exam in my life. I did so bad. I got the lowest score in my entire life among hundreds of mock exams that I have ever taken. So I have never thought about that would happen. And it was shocking. So I had to do some last minute scramble to see where my shitty score can actually take me to. Because that's the score determines my life. And I didn't have that many options. I wanted to stay near to home. And so I was accepted into Sichuan University, which is local in Chengdu again, and studying material sciences because that happened to be the only major that has the lowest acceptance score. That my score was the lowest of the lowest score acceptance score range of that major. And here we go. I'm going to college studying material sciences.
Okay.
And,
wow. Huh. Wow.
So
did you?
Yeah,
Did
it was.
not to interrupt, but like, did you?
No,
Did
it's
you
fine.
have? It's hard to wrap around. What do you want to do when I grow up? I don't know. It depends on what my score is, right?
Oh yeah,
That's
totally.
wow. That
Or you
must.
have an idea of which major of what university you have you want to go, and there are statistics for going back to decades of their acceptance score and their analysis and stuff. You will roughly know I have to score this much to go to this school and stuff
Wow.
like that.
Wow.
So the moment I got my score, I know bye bye to all the finance.
And so material science. Okay.
Yeah, so I started college as a material science student, and I wasn't happy because for the very young and naive me, I couldn't get over the shame that my bad score has brought me. So I had a very tunnel vision. I was very simple-minded because my pride was hurt. I was always a good student. How can I fuck up the only exam that matters in my life, right? That doesn't make sense. And one thing I thought about that can kind of redeem myself was that I want to change major. Because if I was accepted into the major with the lowest acceptance score, then I want to transfer to the major that had the highest acceptance score.
Mm-hmm.
The logic might seem a little twisted to someone who's not really familiar with the Chinese college system, but the missing context here is that transferring majors are actually not common at all in Chinese universities. You are set, like your score decides you where to go and you stay there for 4 years and you graduate. Like people don't change different majors or department. And the and one can only do so by having the best grades of your current department. So it's standardized test again. It's very counterintuitive because they only give the opportunity to change major to the best students of their department. Like why?
Huh. Okay.
Anyway.
Interesting.
But because of this very weird logic, so at that time I thought the only thing to redeem myself, to prove, to show, is that I want to be the best student of this current material science department so that I can change major to the best department that had the highest acceptance score. So here we go. I didn't mess up those exams and I got the chance to transfer to that department, whatever it is. And it turned out to be biology.
Wow.
So that's a very long story of how I even get close to biology, from finance
Wow.
to material sciences to life sciences. And I definitely did not plan for that at all. It's just part of my redemption plan. And that I want to redeem myself. I want to prove that I wasn't bad at taking exams. It was funny. Now I think about it, it's funny. I'm happy everything turned out this way.
That's wild. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's very silly. it was too silly. But I'm glad how it turned out, because now that I'm much older, thinking about, I know what people in finance is doing now. I would absolutely hated it. What the hell? That's not for me. Well, I wouldn't know at that time. So I'm very glad that I didn't get into any finance majors.
Sure.
So then after I finally get into the biology department, I started to take all the mandatory courses in biology. We have genetics, molecular biology, cell biology, organic chemistry, and all the things. I was like, wow, this stuff is surprisingly fascinating. So,
Surprisingly.
Yeah, I didn't think about that at all. I didn't know that. So once I end up in life science department, it didn't take long for me to be hooked. It was very fast. Like I studied there and I was like, my brain was blown away. And fast forward to the end of my sophomore year, my university had a few spots for fully funded exchange program with another university, Hokkaido University in Japan. So at that time, I thought I have never been outside of China, so I applied. Then I went to Japan starting my junior year. And at Hokkaido University, I was taking many courses in biology and a language course as well, but it's also required all the exchange students to do an independent study. So I was assigned to a lab. I didn't really choose a lab, I was assigned to a lab. I joined Professor Fujita Tomomichi's lab, who studies mosses. And becoming a member of the Fujita lab was the turning point in my life for me to be a scientist, because there were a few major reasons. Like, firstly, I was really fortunate to have really, really good mentors along my academic journey. But Fujita Sensei was definitely the OG mentor that really lifted me up. I went to Japan without knowing any Japanese. And although my exchange program was entirely in English, my English was not good at all, because I have never spoken English, had English conversation in my life up to that point. So my English was very broken, even for normal conversation. So for most of the things in the lab, like I wouldn't know what they're called in English at all, most of them. But Fujita Sensei was extremely patient with me. And he worked with me very closely every day and taught me everything himself, from designing primers at just PCR conditions, like everything.
Wow.
And he didn't make me feel afraid of asking stupid questions with my broken English. And I'm forever really grateful for that. Because of him, he made me realize, oh, this is fun. I'm learning really slowly because of the language barrier, but he tried his best. He lifted me up. I'm so grateful for him.
Wow.
So
so powerful.
that's some.
Wow.
Oh, I'm which doesn't say. So that's one thing that I got really good mentor that were patient with me and didn't make me feel stupid. And secondly, there was a time I realized plants can be used as studied organisms. So I always loved plants since I was little. Because my dad really loves plants. We have a lot of plants at home. We grow them, we take care of them, we appreciate them. But I didn't know that plants can be more than just a hobby. And one part of my project in the Fujita lab is that we plate the protoplasts of mosses of different genetic backgrounds on agar plates. We have many, many plates. Then we heat shock them for an hour or two at high temperature, and then we move them back to normal growth conditions. And I would sit in front of the microscope for at least 2 hours per day to just count the number of cell divisions. We want to have a summary of symmetrical versus asymmetrical cell division, and to see what kind of genetic background or the heat shock will have any kind of effect. So this sounds very tedious, but I got so attached to those little mosses that I was studying, because we do terrible things to them. We shred them into pieces. We put them in high heat. We treat them with chemicals, sometimes really rushing. We literally torture them, but they always try to come back and start growing into little mosses again. I was so touched by them. I love them. That was the time I was like, oh, I want to study plants.
I
So
think
all
Barbara
these out.
McClintock would love that, to get to know the feel for the organism. That's even more so. I was like, I love the little plants.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of plants. They always manage to. Whenever some of the cell divisions are so messed up, and if those tiny cells, green tiny cells, grow back to a little tiny little shrub of mosses, I was just like, yes,
You survived. Yeah.
Yes, good job.
Yeah.
So all these hours I spent in the lab made me realize it's so fun to be a researcher, and it perhaps could be something for me too. I wasn't even sure at that time, but that was the time that I started to think about, oh, maybe I want to do research.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the second part. And the last thing is that for my exchange program, my cohort of students, I was one of 3 Chinese students, and we had about 30 students, and all the rest of them come from all over the world. And interacting with them really opened my eye, because there seems to be so many fascinating places and cultures in the world that I didn't know about, and I want to visit them. The friends that I hang out mostly with at that time were from Europe. So by the end of my time in Japan, I have decided that I want to continue to explore research a little, and I want to go to Europe. So one day, one afternoon during my senior year, I sat down and Googled, literally typed biology, master's degree, Europe, and scholarship. And just on the front page, you can still see it. A program show up. It's called Master's Program, Erasmus Mundus Master's Program in Evolutionary Biology. And it described itself as a EU-funded 2-year program joint between 4 different universities with full scholarship. That sounds fits my searching criteria perfectly, right? So I applied, I got interviewed, and got accepted. But my parents were very worried for me because they were convinced that I got scammed. They
Nice.
they have never heard of this master's program. And how can a master's program offer 2 degrees from 4 different universities? And the scholarships they promised was very generous. So there was a time the program asked for my bank information.
Oh no.
So that they can so but the purpose for them to ask that is that they want to pre-deposit the first month of scholarship for students to buy plane tickets in case people can't afford it. Very nice, but very suspicious as well. My parents were even more convinced it would definitely be a scam. And that kind of made me worry as well, like, why are they asking me for bank information?
Wow.
So
yeah, I've never been asked to be deposited money into my account. Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So my parents had a compromise. They helped me to open a new bank account, just in case, if it's
Smart.
a scam.
Yeah, smart.
There's no money to steal. And to all our surprises, 2,000 euro showed up in my bank account. Wow. And this program is real. So I was going to study in Europe. And in Europe, I spent 2 of my best lives there. Like, I made many lifelong friends. I visited like almost 15 countries. I learned new languages. I received top tier free education. And I did research project at almost every school that I studied, which really helped me to solidify the idea that, yes, I want to be a scientist. And secondly, it helped me to find what kind of which field in biology that I'm most interested in. For example, in France, I was studying at University of Montpellier too. I was working with Professor Eric Enberg, and we did many field work in 3 different countries, collecting iris flowers. And we tried to understand the ecological and evolutionary factors that maintained stable yellow and purple flower color polymorphism in many populations. And then I moved to Germany. I worked in Munich Botanic Garden with Professor Susanna Rainer when we were trying to study karyotypes, which is arrangement of chromosomes for a certain species. We're trying to study the karyotypes of Ethedra, which is a lineage of super interesting gymnosperms. And for that program, one interesting thing, coincidence, is that Harvard University in the USA, which is not part of the EU, was also happened to be a participating university for this master program as well. So I also spent a semester at Harvard with Professor Elena Kramer and studied how organs are shaped into beautiful flowers. And that was the time I found I have a true passion for the field of evo-devo, evolutionary developmental biology. Because to me, playing evo-devo is really a perfect mixture of molecular lab work, computational analysis, and microscopy. It allows me to spend a lot of time with my plants, and I can document their details at all levels, from micro to macro, from genes to genomes. I think it's so cool. I think it's made for me. So
I'm trying to hold back my
what's
enthusiasm, by the way, because this is my favorite thing in the world. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, try not to be a biased host here. Yeah.
be
Please.
biased in this episode.
Cool.
Evil devil for the win.
Yeah, definitely. Go for it.
So this really helped me to find my passion. And by the end of my time at Harvard, Elena, my advisor, asked me to consider to do a PhD with her. And I told her I was thinking about doing a PhD in Germany because it's only 3 years. And US takes 6 years. It's twice as long. And she said, well, think about it. So I think about it again and easily changed my mind. And then I moved to the US for my PhD. And now we're finally at the point of my PhD.
Okay.
uh,
What were the things that lined up for you to specifically choose your topic? And give us a little bit of just a brief rundown of what your topic was. Yeah.
yeah, so I study a process called flora meristem termination. We can break it down a little. Flora means flowers. It's my thing. It's your thing. I love them. I appreciate them. I want to study them. I want to understand them. And meristems are specific structures in plants. We can just envision a dome of cells, just a simple dome of cells. Those are meristems. And they're very important for plants because meristems all have a group of stem cells inside. So stem cells in animal studies are like a super hot topic because they are hard to find and hard to use in humans. So many animal labs will devote their entire career of trying to find stem cells and then try to tan them so that we can use them. They're pretty much like fantastic beasts in animal studies. But it's not a big deal for us plant people because plants are amazing and they have so many stem cells located in all different kinds of meristems. That is the reason why if you cut off my arm, it wouldn't grow back. But if you break a branch of a tree, something will grow back. That's because they have stem cell activity in the meristems as a tips to help them to produce organs continuously, theoretically throughout the lifespan of a plant. So all the organs in a flower, or flower, first of all, flower is a structure that has different types of organs. It's specifically arranged into a structure. Every flower is not just an organ, it's a structure of many organs. And all these organs are produced by the flora meristem. The meristem with stem cells that produce flora organs. But every flower only has a finite number of organs. No matter it's 4 or 4,000, it's a finite, it's a defined number. And that means that the stem cell activity inside of the flora meristem cannot be maintained forever. It has to be intentionally terminated, shut down at some point. So this is a very intentional decision of the plant. It has to be highly controlled because you don't want a messed up flower. So there are a lot of complicated regulations going on. And my interest was to study how this very complicated process, developmental decision, is controlled, specifically in columbine flowers, which is the state flower of Colorado, very beautiful. And we study it in columbine is because there are some things that's already known about flora meristem termination in Arabidopsis, which is the lab rat, the Drosophila, the fruit fly of plant studies, that we know so much about those tiny, tiny white flowers. But Arabidopsis flower is very small and it only has very few organs. It means that the stem cell activity inside of the flora meristem will only be active for a little bit and then it shut down. But we have so many different flowers that have way more organs than Arabidopsis. It means that their stem cell activity is maintained much longer than it's being turned off. So we want to use Aquilegia, which has a lot more organs in the flower, to study whether the known molecular programs are conserved or not. And spoiler alert, it's most likely not. And just to try to think about like how does a plant know how to time when to shut it off? That's pretty much my topic, the whole overarching idea of my thesis.
Wow, that for many reasons that I'm not going to belabor the point is very exciting. But so to get to that topic, how did you come about choosing that specific? Was it more your advisor, or was floral termination always a topic that you were interested in? How did that come out?
Oh, good question. So, short answer to your question is no, it wasn't given by my advisor, and no, it wasn't. I didn't know about it. The good thing about doing a longer PhD versus a shorter PhD is that the shorter one, normally you were given a project, and the plan of completing the project is sometimes very often very clear, which is why you can complete it within 3 years. But we had the benefit of not do so. Like for my PhD program, when I just joined, my advisor did give me a project, but that was more for me to understand what kind of techniques that we're using in the lab, what can we do and what we cannot do, like what's the limitation and potentially exciting part of our study system, and get to know the system very well. So that project later published, which also led to a publication that really helped me to understand the system well. And then I spent the first 2 years to really do a lot of reading, trying to see what sparks for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are so many things. I love all aspects of playing Evil Devo, but some things, the excitement is slightly more than others.
Mm-hmm.
So once I realized there are slight difference in excitement, I spent a lot of time to read a lot to see what can reaches the most excitement level
Mm-hmm.
among all the things and meristem became something that I find so fascinating, which you can probably tell from my talking that I think I love those, like plants are so awesome with meristems and different kinds of meristems. How do they regulate how these stem cells are maintained and regulated? I find it fascinating. There are a lot to be done, has been done to the meristems that produce leaves and roots already. We know a lot about these systems in different plant species as well. But then I realized for flora meristem, not so much. For flower studies, we know a lot about how different organ identities are determined, or some downstream things of color and stuff. But what really decides the number and the timing of how things are, how the organs are initiated, turn out to be quite understudied. So that's how I went from searching all the things about flora evo devo, find that I'm obsessed with meristem, and then there's actually an empty space in studying meristem, and then I was like, that's my thing now.
You approach it. I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020, but you approach it with such confidence. Did you always have that type of confidence going into finding a place with not too much study, or yeah?
Oh
How
no,
did you achieve this? Yeah.
it was, well, first shout out to my advisor Elena, who is the best. And I think, let me back out a little if
Sure.
that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So in hindsight, there have been many benefits that I wasn't even aware of to do a so-called long PhD, because this 6 years really allowed me to think about not only just what I'm most obsessed with, you know, what is my working style, my own limitations and potential as a scientist, and what I'm good at and what I'm not. And, but it's also not just about a degree or publications that I had. It's the supposedly extra time really allowed me to repeatedly think about and interrogate my ideas of, like, what does it mean to be a scientist? What does it mean to be an educator, to be a teacher or a mentor? And now I'm at the point that I'm still constantly experiencing imposter syndrome, actually. But I also have clear thoughts and confidence in some aspects. And this growth is definitely due to my advisor. I turn to her for every little big thing, and she never turned me away. She's always supportive. So she showed me, what does it mean? Like someone could be both super smart and super kind. And what does it mean to have unconditional support for your student? So for my entire dissertation, it's not a product from my own brainchild. It's a discussion, constant discussion between us. And she gave me idea, we bounce ideas back and forth. It's not just, I couldn't achieve anything without her help. So because she has been such a constant and supportive presence during those 6 years and even now too, and that gives me confidence. Sometimes I don't know whether I'm good enough, but I think if people I respect, I look up to, such as Elena, think I'm good enough, then I must be good enough. So that the mentors I have there are my constant reference point when I feel not as confident.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. I hope to the folks listening to really champion for finding good mentors, right, and really trying to extract a little bit more support from the mentors you already have, because clearly, I
Mhm.
mean, your story is a perfect example of how much that shapes you. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
and
cool.
don't be afraid to like. We always as students we always think like my my question will be stupid. It will show I'm stupid. Like no, but like most people, good mentors will not care about that. They will not think things like that. They will be like, oh, I'm asking the question. Let me try to figure
Yeah,
it out with the student.
because also you're a student, right? For you to have
Mm-hmm,
prerequisite knowledge, it means you're pre-trained, right? And it's just like,
mm-hmm.
are you looking for like really good hands, or are you actually trying to be a mentor, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Very, very cool. Okay, so it's your first year. You have your idea kind of fleshed out. Did you find your idea within the first year?
No, the second year. The first year I was learning the techniques and I was doing
Gotcha,
the projects that Elena gave me. Yeah. And
gotcha.
by the end of second year, things are coming together and I had my qualification exams that I proposed my topic to all my committee members.
Okay.
And then after that, it was like full time.
Gotcha. And how did, for the folks who aren't familiar with quals, how did the qualification exam go? Did it feel, what were you challenged specifically on your topic, or more broader? Like, how did that pan out?
So my understanding is that different schools have slightly different format, and for Harvard, we have two major components. One is you have to propose your thesis work in detail. What are you planning to do? The different chapters and how do they come together and what kind of questions they're trying to achieve. So that's specifically about your question, your dissertation. And the second part is that we have to propose syllabi for three courses that we potentially would teach.
Hmm.
So three courses that's related to our research. We have to build a new syllabi. I mean, nobody built new syllabi. We have to modify existing ones, fit our own teaching needs, and propose reading list and teaching goals for all the courses. And during call, which is normally 3 full hours for us, these two parts normally were divided into half and half of they will grow you on the dissertation part into the technical details of like why do you try to do this, like have you considered this is like what about the parameters, like is it feasible in this lab or not.
Mhm.
And then for the more general part they will, those professors, they read so many papers. They were just like, oh, I saw you proposed this rating for this one. Like, what does this paper say? So you have to really, you can't just write something down. You actually have to know what kind of ratings you have proposed. So it did spend, I did spend at least 2 months full time studying for it, and it was very stressful and it took me 3 full hours. There are a lot of questions I couldn't answer. Well, in the beginning, I was very nervous that one of the one of my committee members threw a softball question to me. It's like is Equilegia, which is a columbine flower, more closely related to Arabidopsis or rice? That I couldn't answer it on site, and then Elena tried to comfort me. It's like slow down, don't worry. And so there were many questions I couldn't answer, and there are many questions I probably nobody can ever answer. They were just trying to push your limits. But after that, it was rewarding because firstly, I got a group of really good supportive committee members. So after after the exam, you have to step out of the room, have the committee members talk amongst themselves to decide whether you pass or not. And then your advisor will invite you to go back to the room, and then they will tell you congratulations and they shake your hand and say you did really well. And that was the time you feel, oh, everything's worth it. I did okay. Like they didn't care about I didn't answer this question or whatever. So I think for good professors, for good mentors, they the purpose of the exam is clear for them. They will never really drill down. They have an expectation of what you're supposed to know and what you might not know, although you don't know about this expectation. So like you not being able to answer some of the questions might be expected for they don't even know the answer
Sure.
most likely.
Sure.
Yeah, so like it's not a big deal in hindsight, but of course whatever going through that process will be extremely stressful for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I can only imagine just the feeling of you are qualified now. Did you feel qualified after passing your quals?
Oh, when they shake my hand, I was like, I'm qualified.
Yeah, you felt it? Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I can imagine, I mean, like you said, different departments, different schools have different kind of rituals of sorts, but from the point of your qualification going forward, you felt more capable and more confident and more supported within your department for your project specifically?
Um, my confidence, my happiness after passing qual didn't last for that long because
Uh-oh.
I still know they are supported. They are supporting me, but the problem is with science is that things just don't work.
Yep.
So so when I proposed all the experiments and stuff, it worked perfectly in my head.
Sure. Sure.
But when I'm actually doing them, they never work as well as what I imagined. So like once things started to not work and more things start to fail, then it brought me back to the ground and I'm starting over again. There's nothing to be proud of.
Okay.
And so particularly very I had a I had gone through a very hard time during my third year of PhD. So every PhD program, as far as I know, they have teaching requirement
Mhm.
that you have to teach for at least a few semesters. And if you have external funding from fellowship from NSF, for example, that can bring you teaching relief. But as an international student, I'm not eligible to apply for any federal funding. So like there's literally no funding for me, and I have to teach 6 semesters for my PhD,
Oof.
which is a huge chunk of time. But I knew about this going into a PhD program. So I had this perfect plan in my mind that I will space my teaching duties in such a way that my third year of PhD, I don't have to teach at all.
Mhm.
This is going to be the year I get the most data. And it turned out that was a year that nothing worked. It was very depressing.
Oof.
Nothing worked. I can't even small success stories like a PCR worked was rare at the time. I don't know what happened. Maybe because I jinxed it, which is real. So that was very hard. And also there was a time that I started to do experiments that's outside the expertise of my advisor. Before that, she has a whole set of experiments that she's very hands-on. She can help me to troubleshoot.
Mhm.
But then at some point, I'm stepping outside of her uh, experiments that she has personally done. So we both know the theoretical components of some experiments very well, but as you know, like something's reading the protocol alone doesn't. If you understand the protocol, doesn't mean you can replicate it and make it work.
Yep.
So that was a year I needed to learn new things that didn't have that much help. Not because she didn't want to help me; she tried her best to help, but I'm the one doing experiment. And also, that was just a bad year. That nothing worked, and I was and then on the fourth year, I have to teach again and doing more experiments. So that was a very hard year. I had my qual in my second year, and the third year was the worst year of my my
Wow.
PhD.
Wow. So what did you need to do to kind of pull yourself out of that 1 year rut, right? Like where nothing
I
was working.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I thought a lot about it because at that time I did went through a lot of depression and anxiety, and I think it's normal for many PhD students because PhD is a very hard process. And what I got from that is also I wish is advice for people is that don't do a PhD for a degree. You have to be really passionate about what you're studying to get through a PhD and still not hate it. For times like this, that nothing is, it's very disheartening, it's very discouraging. But what really kept me going. Sometimes I don't want to think about my project, but sometimes when I think about it, I still find it interesting. I still find like I still want to understand what's going on. Although this is not working, maybe I can try other things. Other things are not working, maybe let me talk to people. So I think the thing that really helped me to get through that period is that I am very interested in my project. But I can imagine if one is doing a PhD just for the sake of degree rather than reached a level of passion to do the project, going through this kind of rough period would be very, very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of projects that I've done that are passion projects that were constantly failing all the time, and then I had external pressures to do like client work because I have to
Mhm.
pay the bills, of course.
Right.
And it was just so demoralizing to go back day after day doing the same experiment with little modifications to see what the hell's going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I think it was Churchill that said like, success is defined as going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm, right? But
Yeah.
like you have to be,
That's
yeah, but you have to be
yeah.
like superhuman to be flawlessly enthusiastic all the time, you know?
Yeah. That's not possible, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, of course, yeah. And so when you pulled yourself up from that, did you have a support network, or was it your advisors? Like where? Tell us about like how you got the support to lift yourself out and push that next year.
Yeah, really good question. I was gonna say that it's not really just done by myself. I had not just my advisor who is always unconditionally supporting me. I also had a group of friends who my cohort, PhD cohort that we studied PhD together, were very close to each other. So we really formed a support group for each other. They are there for me. And interestingly, which is why I know this is an experience that almost every PhD will go through because they are going through very similar things as well. So if if we go to a bar together, they're like, "How's it going?" I was like, "Nothing worked today." And then there will be some people who's like, "Well, I tried this for a week, it didn't work either." And then you feel some comfort from each other.
Yeah, yeah. Just like at the bar in after the trenches of like a long battle, and you're just sitting there, just kind of shaking, going like, "Oh, nothing worked for you too. Great."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Like I feel confident.
yeah.
And another thing is that all of us are studying slightly different things. We are all in different fields of biology. And sometimes talking to people about the troubles you're running into can provide you very surprising solutions. Because I only have expertise, for example, in development and this. But if I'm doing protein work, that I think I know what's going on, reading all the protocols, but some of the proteins are just not behaving the way it is. And some of my other friends study like proteins in yeast. He might just point out, oh, it might be this protein is not soluble in water or something. It's just stuff like that. Like
Right.
sometimes we are very narrow-minded to tunnel vision again to our own very depressing failures. But trying to talk to more people, I find it always works. And there are more kind people out there than we can imagine, and people are happy to help. So they are not even intentionally helping you. You pick their brain and they spark out some ideas, and it's like, oh, interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's universally relatable across all researchers because we're right at the edge, right? And sometimes nobody knows the answer, and maybe you're the only one who
Mm-hmm.
has the slightest idea. But just like
Mm-hmm.
inspiration can come from anywhere. So yeah, very very good
Mm-hmm.
point. Um, okay, so let's say you're in your fourth year now. You're teaching
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
do those experiments. So
Mm-hmm.
so how did you survive?
Well, I gave up on some experiments.
Okay, all right, all right.
So I learned giving up is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And because for a whole year of most things don't work, we my advisor, my committee member, and I did have meetings to adjust some of the directions. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have to do that for the sake of time, for my sanity as well.
Sure.
So they were supportive in trying, and we changed the research direction slightly. For well, a simple example: as a second year, when I was proposing all my experiments, at that time, we were told that aqualegia can be stably transformed very soon. So we outsourced this
Very true.
to, uh, you know, so we outsourced this to another center that supposedly has a very strong expertise in doing stable transformation, and we got some exciting updates that we can regenerate shoots from callus. Oh, sounds like it's just right there. So
Sounds like
I
tobacco.
have, mhm, I had multiple experiments proposed entirely based on the premise that we will have transformation ready to go. And after my third year of failure, also they are also feeling in their center that they didn't give us transgenics. And we had to change some protein work. We have to ditch the parts that I proposed all the fancy molecular experiments for, for all the transgenic clients, and we have to change the gear, which is also, but this is not a bad thing. Changing gear is not a bad thing because I have to ditch all the experiments that are originally planned. And I was like, what else can I do? That was the time I started to think about, I read some papers and I think about maybe I can do live confocal imaging, because now there are softwares available and there are some European groups that publish some fantastic papers on shoot epichimera stance in Arabidopsis, how they can segment the cells and track the growth, and how it's just fascinating to me. And I think it's also very important because we study functions of genes, but we care about phenotypes, and we need to understand how is the actions of genes translated into actions of cells, and that's through development. If we can track the cell parameter changes, then we'll understand the process better. So that helped me to develop an entirely new chapter in live confocal imaging, and which is the main thing I do now. I do confocal because things didn't work out for me. I had to think about something else. So in the end, it's all good.
Yeah. No, that tenacity and resilience, I think, is something that's really important. But what do you think taught you that resilience? Like, where did that resilience come from? That like, okay, I got to do something. Because sometimes people get really broken when their plans don't come out, and it causes this like executive dysfunction where you can't move because your perfectly laid plans have exploded.
Yes, I think that's because for all the experiences I told you in the very beginning, and those things, because I took my time to think about whether I want to be a scientist or not, why I want to be do a PhD or not, whether I want to do research, for all the end of my time in Japan, all the time in Europe, that was the time that I know very well in science that things don't turn out to be normally how it is. So I didn't go into my PhD with the expectation is that what I proposed would always work. Although I didn't think it would change that much, but I had the expectation that things don't work as normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people sometimes get too discouraged. Could be the reason that it's the reality is just too far away from what they expected, and not being able to not being able to reconcile with the fact that science is about unknown and it doesn't work the way we want because it's unknown. I think that's really important. You have to be very comfortable with the fact that like very, very comfortable with it to continue.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I can't imagine the. I think there's a lot of people who don't feel comfortable with the concept of we don't actually know what's going to happen, right? Or like which direction. I mean, I've had personal projects go in very strange directions because like something that didn't work led to interesting data that immediately made me want to pivot, right? Because on my end of things, it's hard to fall down a rabbit hole that has rabbit holes, right?
Yes.
And so you're like, and the most important thing is to finish something, right? It's to like wrap it up. While the structure of grad school gives you that push and that deadline to push something, from an amateur perspective, you can dwell on something for far too long sometimes. Where like you could have found something interesting. Yeah, so I'm learning as I'm going with all of these episodes. I really appreciate that.
but I also want to add is that from my own experience and from all the students that I mentored or watched them grow as scientists were later, I realized it's also okay for someone to realize, oh, this how science is not what I expected. I want to do something else. We had students worked in a science lab and realized that reality of science, that most things don't work out the way they want. That made them realize, oh, basic science is not my thing. I want to do something that have a more direct uh, question to output process. And I think that's good too. That's like pretty much a self-discovery process for people. If you can recognize this is not your thing, that's good. If you recognize this is your thing, that's also fantastic.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Okay. So you told us how you pushed through the fourth year. So now in year five, you're getting closer to. Did you start writing in year five, or?
Oh no, COVID happened.
Right, right. That little thing, that inconvenience, right? Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a unique
So
thing. So yeah. So how was COVID during your PhD? My God. Yeah. You can
my
take a
memory
minute
is
and just breathe.
blurry.
Yeah.
It was it was panicking because I haven't finished my experiments yet.
Yeah.
And there's really not much that I can do. I made my website during COVID because
Mhm.
I had nothing else to do, which I'm glad that it seems
It's
like
a really pretty
good to
website,
have
by the
a
way. You guys
it's
should
good
check
to
it
have
out.
a thank you.
Link down below. Yeah.
So but I try to keep myself occupied. I But it's very, very hard. Also, but most of my effort and time were spent on teaching because I was teaching at that time. I was teaching biology of plants, and semester started at the end of January, so we have our weekly hands-on labs, like 3 hours. We dissect things, and then in March we have to be completely online, and that's pretty much the entire first half year to just try to adjust to online teaching. How do we finish? How do we make sure students are learning? How do we check in with them? And they, it's that's most of the thing I'm working on. It's just like thinking about how to make this course continue and are the students okay. That's also experience that transition to online teaching make me more became more aware of inclusive teaching and as well because so many things like you never know what's the family situation in a student like they sometimes we will design a course with wrong assumptions but that was an experience that made me realize we need to be more inclusive and more caring and more forgiving because people you don't know what's going on in people's life. So that was a big part of COVID when COVID just happened that we were struggling to teach. And after that, I started to worry about my own project. I took some plants from the growth chamber back home, tried to grow them. Didn't really work that well. And it's just all a mess. But then when labs slowly start to open up, we can go in, I think, twice per week and not overlap with other people. And I started to do more, but we still have to give up on a lot of things, a lot of experiments that I want to do. I wanted to apply for some lab exchange programs to go to an Arabidopsis lab to learn some techniques. Of course, that didn't happen,
Right.
and just stuff like that. Yeah. So I only started writing in my sixth year, and that was hard to start because there's always more experiments to do.
Sure.
So I had several conversations with my advisor that okay, I will stop doing experiment in January. And January passed, I got a little bit more result. And I feel if I just work for one more week,
Mm.
I'll get more result, which didn't happen. And then it's March. We'll stop and start writing in March. And that didn't happen either until I really scheduled a defense date in August.
Mm.
My advisor in April is like, you gotta start writing.
Right. Right.
So by
Wow.
the end of April, I really stopped and then started writing full time. And those are a few months that every day I'm mostly reading and writing. And that was pretty miserable as well because I got into the cycle that every day I have a very fixed schedule and I just sit in front of my computer. But I was so tired and I'm just doing it for nothing. I'm wasting my time, but I didn't realize that. Going through a lot of papers, I'm making notes, and I remember absolutely nothing
Hmm.
from what I have read or read. So it took me probably the first month of thesis writing to realize rest actually works. So instead of writing full time every day, I actually will take the weekend off.
Yeah.
I actually will take time off. If I feel too tired, I will take a nap and stuff. Like I wasn't doing that before because I was under very strict time pressure. I was like, I have to work every single minute that I'm awake to finish my thesis. But later I realized that was not a good plan. And
Wow. Yeah, that's such a it seems obvious, right? Like rest is important, right? But you also you carry that guilt of like the time
yeah,
is ticking and all that. And I just can't
yeah,
imagine the complex like interplay between everything's limited, your results are limited, but your thesis still has to stand on its own, right? And
mm-hmm.
so how did you shape the narrative to make up for the experiments that you had to get rid of? And were your
Oh,
committee like accepting of that? I mean, obviously they have to be, because what's the
yes,
alternative?
they are very acceptive. They're very accommodating. And one good perk, also sad perk, good, sad, I don't know. One thing about having a lot of things that I want to do but I didn't achieve is that it makes writing discussion very easy.
Right. Just like here's the things that the field should do. Right. Here's my
Yeah.
list. Yeah.
So if we have done this experiment, we would have known about this aspect, perhaps for future
Yeah.
studies.
Yeah. 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 And then like
So
a
that's
quick line
something I've
about
done.
funding. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I honestly find the introduction so hard to write.
Mm.
I always start from materials and methods, and I describe my results. And based on the results, I can write the discussion. I always write the introduction last, and I find it so hard. I still find it pretty hard. Like sometimes when I was a student reading some papers, they open with a really grand sentence like blah 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 is a key question in evolutionary biology. And sometimes just wonder
Period.
like how do you know that's a key question? Like when when would I have the audacity to write like would people just
Yeah, like there should be like 50 annotation marks on it, like 50 citation marks on it. Yeah. Yeah.
it's too broad and bold that I just didn't feel confident enough as a student to say this is the key question in the entire field.
Yeah.
So things like that.
Yeah, I like reading the abstract. Like I love reading the, theses just because like they're a treasure trove if you want to do like a deep dive, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
love it to death. But always in the introduction, the first couple lines are just these like, this is the
I don't.
grandest thing, and I'm just like, okay, sure. I mean, please convince me otherwise. I mean, it's still like fantastic, phenomenal labor that took a ton of time and is worth, and it should stand on its own. And sometimes I feel like that style is a little bit forced, right?
Yeah,
Like just like you
I
said, I'm
agree.
sure that the vast majority of students felt the same way of going like, am I really gonna write this? Okay.
Yeah, unless you really strongly feel this is the grand question of the field.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Also, we also have a running joke among all the plant people is to see how many papers will say unlike animals or open with unlike animals.
Yeah.
Plants, blah 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 blah
Yeah. Yeah, just like a little emoji of just like animals.
Yeah,
Just perfect.
unlike animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so you're writing in your sixth year. You took breaks. Did you feel like there was like linear progress, or did it come in bursts of like
Oh,
motivation,
totally
inspiration?
it bursts.
Bursts.
Yeah, because of after I discovered rest, I discovered bursts.
Yeah, yeah. After
So
fire, there was rest. Yes.
yeah, well, like after my brain is actually rested, I realize I can write a lot more than before, and it's just way more clear. But this entire process, also again, shout out to my advisor. It's a interactive process between us.
Mhm.
Like I give her something, incomplete things, she gives me comment back, and then it goes back and forth all the time. She was extremely busy. She was departmental chair. She has many other duties, but she always put me and other students who are defending as well as her top priority. So like the versions that we get from her is very timely. If I give it to her today, I that's one of my favorite parts of writing thesis is that for example, if today I send Elena a draft, the rest of the day I can completely relax because
Hmm.
there's nothing I can do. And then normally she will give it back to me the day after or after 2 days. And after a whole day of full rest and look at the comments, then I'll be like, yes, let's go do this again.
Right.
Until so this process worked out very well between us.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that just being able to be like, okay, hit send and then just melt,
Yeah.
right? Just like become
Yeah. Then
a
just like
min
close my
puddle.
laptop and
Yeah.
not think about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Become a potato for a little bit. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you wrote your thesis. Now, as the ink was drying on the last bits of it, did you feel that you've become an authority on the topic? Like,
Yes, I
yeah.
did feel that. I did feel like I know my tiny little thing very, very, very well. I felt like then nobody cared about it, but I did feel proud about like I know flora meristem termination in collegia. I am the one
Hmm.
that knows every possible thing here
Oh, that's
at
so
that
cool.
point.
That's so
So
cool.
that was very, very cool. And I think again I had this confidence. It's because of the encouragement from my advisor. Like she helped me to develop all these and give me feedbacks, and like I feel very supported during that.
Yeah, because embodying authority coming from student to like expert of a topic just seems so
Mhm.
such a surreal path, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
Mhm.
it's like the Keanu in the Matrix. Like I know kung fu. Like all of a sudden, um, was it
Yes.
was it a gradual I know kung fu, or did you just suddenly know kung fu? Like when did it actually hit? Like whoa, holy shit! I actually know all of this. Like I master at the helm of my ship. Yeah.
I think it's kind of a sudden discovery for me
Hmm.
that because my chapters are quite tightly connected. It's all over this theme of a flora meristem termination, although it's doing different approaches from different angles to approach this topic, but it's all over this whole thing. So that makes the writing, the reading for introductions and discussions quite overlapping for different chapters. And at some point, for some of the chapters, when I'm writing the conclusion or the whole introduction for the entire thesis, I had to reread some things. And then I realized I don't have to read them anymore because I know them by heart. I know what they're talking about, and
Cool.
I know what we know for there. So at that time, I did have confidence that I know my things.
Yeah, you didn't need the sheet music anymore. You could just play the
Yeah,
music.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very,
I,
very cool.
I feel like if I talk about my study, I don't have to prepare and anticipate the questions because I think I know the questions. If something I can't answer, it's because we don't know the answer.
Right,
Like
right.
I had that. Yeah.
That's so cool. In the previous episode, which will air before yours, because we had it back to back today, um,
Mhm.
I was speaking. Susanna mentioned that teaching helped her realize that she really understood, right? Because like there's an old saying, I forget who quoted it, but you don't really know until you teach,
Oh
and
yeah, totally. Yeah.
yeah. And so
And
how was the undergraduate teaching experience like part of this? Like how did it reinforce you?
that was the whole teaching experience is I didn't know how important to me until I have gone through it, which goes back to why I said like there are benefits of doing a longer PhD that I didn't even know, and teaching is one of them. It does, of course, help me to understand how to explain things better, no matter in presentations or in writing. But I think, which obviously helped is my thesis writing, because two of my committee member is animal people. They don't really know plants, so I would have to write in a way that's interesting for them. And
Mm.
I hope I achieved it. I didn't ask them, but they were happy about my thesis, so I would just take it as a win. But the teaching part is more for me to really think about what does it mean to be a teacher and an educator plus a scientist. Like I said in the very beginning, I was a good student. I was good at taking exams. I was raised in an environment that teaching actually doesn't matter that much because all I need to do is to read the textbooks, know it very well, do a lot of problem sets, and I can get really, really good exams. So, good scores. So, for a big part of my life as a student, I didn't think teaching is important. until very recent years, I started to interrogate this idea, like because I've been to so many different countries, exposed to so many education systems that's very different from the one that I was raised in. That really interrogated my idea of whether teaching is important or not. And if it is important, like what what should a teacher try to achieve and stuff like that. So it not only helped me with my science part, in general, for me as a scientist, as a teacher, I think it really, really helped me. And if I did a shorter PhD in Germany, I wouldn't have the opportunity to really teach so many courses. And that will be detrimental, I think, for me
Yeah.
personally.
Wow. So that was quite the journey. So once you you defended and oh how did your defense go? Was it were you
Oh, it went
nervous?
really
Was it
well.
went really well?
It,
Cool.
yeah, because I was grateful it was on Zoom because it's still in lockdown. But so we were not doing even hybrid defense yet. Everyone was defending on Zoom. But because of that, and thanks back old times, the science Twitter was so supportive.
Hmm.
And there are many people that would never have gone to my defense, actually attended my defense online, which I was really grateful. That felt like a party,
Hmm. That's
and
awesome.
I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a nice bit of closure to an otherwise technically non-closed
Hmm, hmm.
body of work. Um, so after you graduated and eventually the small piece of paper that your life's work that you bled onto was mailed to you, how did it feel? Did you feel like things finished? Did you feel like it was just the beginning? What did that feel like?
It feels like an ending of one part, but then I started postdoc and really think about applying for faculty positions. I realized my PhD taught me so many things, but that's not the end of it. So like they helped me to learn things faster and to think faster, to really think broader as well. But that's why it felt like the ending and the beginning. But the ending is only for that period.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so tell us a little bit about your postdoc. So obviously this is a shameless plug for Mimulus propaganda. So please,
Minimalist,
yes,
yes. So I oh, this is also something I want to share is that I
please.
joined this lab by Professor Yao Yuan at University of Connecticut. I joined because he contacted me and asked whether I can consider to do a postdoc in his lab. And I think this is something all PIs should do. Just go to reach out to PhD students who hasn't graduated yet and talk to them. And I think it's lovely. So I then realized Yao's lab studies flower color in monkey flowers, mimulus, and he has two NIH grant, which is unheard of.
Two.
Or yeah, which is like flower color NIH, and it didn't make sense to me.
Mhm.
So I joined his lab. I was like, this is something I should learn. How did he get NIH grant by study basic functions of flowers?
Yeah.
So, and it turned out it's such a great decision. Like Yahoo is also a fantastic mentor. I am blessed with all the good mentors, but Yahoo is also like Elena, unconditionally support me. I feel he raised me as a colleague and collaborator to start with rather than she's my postdoc, you know,
Hmm.
like the amount of respect and support that he gives me is really, really important. So now I'm studying another aspect of flora meristem regulation. During my PhD, I'm trying to understand how the meristem is timed so that you can turn off the stem cell activity. Right now, I'm studying how the meristem decides positional information of different organs. So some of the flowers are radially symmetric. It has multiple planes of symmetry, but some flowers, like orchids, they only have one plane of symmetry. So I'm trying to understand how this symmetry changes occur in flowers.
Very, very cool. And so now you transitioned to are you tenure track right now towards it?
Yes,
Yeah,
in a month.
in a
Yes.
month. In a month. Yeah. So tell us how was that transition? Because that's an interesting ride from PhD to postdoc to PI. Like,
Oh, it's right now. I'm very excited, but I'm also very stressed that stressing for several reasons. One is that I'm trying to finish up my postdoc work, and I'm also trying to set up my lab right now, which is under renovation. So I have to think about how many sinks I need, and what kind of plugs I need, what kind of fridge to buy, and what color of the wall I want, which is also important,
Sure.
and stuff like that. And more importantly, I thought a lot more about people, like students and postdocs who will be joining my lab, because then I will be responsible for them. I want to be a mentor like Elena and Yao Wu, to really support them and lift them up. And I learned many mentoring things from my advisors. There are things that I definitely will continue, but there are also things that I wouldn't do, because people have different personalities. I would think some of the things they have done, probably for my case, I would have done differently. So I have done a lot of thinking of how to deal with different kind of students, how to anticipate their needs, how to make them feel comfortable enough to open up to me if they are facing troubles. Like, how do I make sure they know an open dialogue should be maintained? Like, how do we communicate all these kind of things? Of course, right now I'm just doing a lot of thinking, and for in the future it's probably case by case, but that's also something stressful. It's like I will have to get what kind of grants I have to write, and I will have to pay their salary. I'm responsible for their academic journey, and I'm gonna be a very new PI just starting. And if my postdoc wants to find a faculty position too, like how can I support them? What kind of letter I should write to not to help them, to give them best advantage, this kind of things. So that kind of stress is kind of stressful. Yeah. And then moving with two cats.
Sure. Yeah, two cats were probably very upset. So you went from being an apprentice on someone else's ship to then docking and drafting out the plans for your own ship, right?
Yeah.
And eventually that ship will set sail in like a month's time, right? So what is there training for stuff like this? Like, how do you just like, outside of the logic of how many sinks do I need? Like, it seems like that's something that like nobody teaches. Like, how do you prepare for something like that?
Mostly I learn from my advisors, and I talk to them about different situations. We do situation simulations all the time. Oh, not official simulations. It's just like, what about this student? If this student, like a different student have different needs, I will consult their opinions, and I will think about what they will act and how would I act and stuff like that. But wait, I lost my train of thought. Oh, training. Yeah. So I've been to a few official online workshops. I think it taught me things about inclusive and culture aware mentoring, but I think it's hard to give this kind of workshops without concrete situations, because all your mentees will be different. Yep. Even if you will say like, oh, like when you have first generation college students and be aware of these and stuff, but I learned things, but I think I learned way more things by watching my mentors mentoring their students and how I have been mentored for them. Since I consider myself extremely lucky and they mentored me well, so I will try to replicate this for other people. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going for.
Yeah, I mean, you've hammered the nail a bunch of times as saying just how important mentorship is. And so for students listening that may not know how much power they have in terms of what mentors they have or what to expect from mentors, what would be your advice for navigating that type of situation? Like, let's say you don't feel like you're supported enough, or you feel like there are certain parts that you want to be supported in, but you maybe feel timid to admit that that's a weakness. Like, what would be some advice for that? Sorry for the tough questions.
No, it's a really good question. I think for students, sometimes you have to try to find your own peer mentoring group as well. And once you have peers supporting you, that's actually very powerful. So even if for junior graduate student to have a slightly more senior graduate student to consider as pure mentor, but having someone that doesn't have quite big of a power dynamic to discuss this kind of things would be very, very important, very empowering as well. But then you will realize many difficult situations that you have been experiencing is not unique, and there are people have gone through it and have navigated through it. So I would definitely encourage all the students to try to form a peer mentoring group for themselves. But as for the mentor, sometimes you would be very, very hard, but I hope I encourage you guys to really muster up the courage to just try twice or three times asking some questions you don't want to ask. You will be surprised sometimes. Sometimes mentors don't know everything. Mentors can be stupid as well. They don't know that you didn't know about this. They sometimes don't know your feelings are hurt. And most of the mentors, they will want to support you. They want you to be good. Their pride is on you thriving. So give them three chances. Tell them, if you tell them some of the questions that, ask them some of the questions that you think it might be too hard, but give them some chances to react, and you might be surprised as well.
Wow. That's the mentors could be stupid sometimes is something that is, I mean, it's humbling in every direction, right? And it's raw and it's vulnerable because you're also, if you're on the receiving end of that comment, right,
Mm-hmm.
you always like have to have a self check of just going like wow, because I mean, intellectual humility is so important, but it's also
Yeah,
difficult when you have a professional setting, right?
yeah, yeah.
Because it's like it's mentee mentor relationship, and there needs to be a sense of authority, or else the student feels
Right, right, right.
unstable within the path, right? So yeah, I can
Mm-hmm.
imagine that that's a complex thing, but from everything you're saying, it seems that like honesty and vulnerability actually goes both ways for a really in a number of different ways for a really really beneficial outcome at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah. Give
Because
your mentors some chances and be vulnerable in front of them. Like for just a few times, it might hurt you, but sometimes you most likely it will empower you and help you. Like try it. It will be hard, but try it a little bit.
that's huge. That's huge. So with all the stuff that you've learned throughout your entire journey of the ups and the downs and the nothing working and then some things working and COVID and all of that, what would you tell your younger self as advice if you could give where would be the most important for you to say, and what would you say if you could time travel back?
Oh, I can even tell myself for this right now. I'm not very good at this. Like, burn, burned out sucks. Don't
Don't burn out, ladies and gentlemen. Don't do it.
try not to do that. Burnout sucks.
Yeah.
The year that things didn't work, I burned out so much. Right now, I'm stressed and I'm burning out. Do I know I shouldn't do this? Yes. Am I doing this? Yes. But I'm trying to tell myself, rest, take a break. Burned out really sucks. So try not to have that.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, but it still needs to be said a million times.
Yeah.
Like I think,
Try your best.
yeah, like I really hope your discovery of rest resonates with a lot of people, right? Especially folks that might be suffering right now from burnout,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I myself am juggling way too many plates, and a lot of it is also maintaining my own household with what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right,
And
right.
so like my failure is like existential a little bit because if things don't work out, I lose my home, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stresses,
Stress.
but burning out won't help, right?
No,
Like
it
it
never
would.
helps.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. With the remaining bit of time, is there anything you'd like to plug or say or talk about? The floor is yours, however you'd like it. It's anything you'd like.
Um,
Yeah.
I want to plug a little bit about my lab, which will be starting in a month. Again at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Department of Plant Biology. I study all things flowers, and I'm interested in all things flowers. My own research project will be focusing on regulation of flora meristem, mainly in Mimulus, and later will be in Ecologia as well. But if you want to chat about anything flowers or curious about my research and or just want some advice or something, shouldn't reach out. I can be found on BlueSky, and I have my website, which have my email address as well.
All the
I
details
love
down
talking to
below.
people.
Yeah.
I love talking to people. One thing that scientists share is that we're all yappers. And if you're talking, if we're talking about science and research, things I'm passionate about, I'm more than happy to talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Min. This was fantastic. I'm thrilled to have you as one of the inaugural episodes, and I'm sure there's going to be a part 2 and 3 in the future where we dive into more technicals.
Thank you for having me. I'm having a great time.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.